We usually think of financial ruin as a loud, dramatic event. We imagine the day trader who loses everything on a bad options play. We picture the family swept into foreclosure because of a predatory mortgage. We think of scams, bankruptcies, and sudden market crashes. But today's story is different. Today's story is about a man who did everything right by traditional standards. He didn't lose a single dime on the stock market. He didn't invest in shady crypto scams. He didn't go bankrupt because of a failed business, and he never maxed out a dozen credit cards. He simply waited. He waited for the perfect time. He waited for the market to calm down. He waited until he had just a little bit more in his savings account. And that single quiet decision, the decision to do absolutely nothing, cost him over $1 million. This is the story of how caution became the most expensive mistake of one man's life. A few months ago, I received a long, very reflective email from someone I'll call Daniel. Daniel is 67 years old today. He lives in a quiet, working-class suburb in Ohio. If you looked at his life from the outside, you would see the very definition of a financially responsible American. Daniel worked most of his adult life as an IT support technician. He wasn't pulling in a massive Silicon Valley salary, but he made a solid, reliable middle-class income. He paid his bills on time. He never bought a car he couldn't afford, preferring to drive reliable, used sedans for 10 years at a time. He had no gambling problems, no expensive country club memberships, and no luxury lifestyle habits. Daniel was proud of the fact that he was cautious. Growing up in a family that struggled during the inflation shocks of the 1970s, he was taught that cash was king and debt was a trap. He built an emergency fund. He kept his money in a local bank account, safe from the perceived casino of Wall Street. But as Daniel sat writing that email to me, looking at his bank statements at age 67, the harsh reality set in. While his peers were retiring, spending time with their grandchildren, or moving to warmer climates, Daniel was setting his alarm for 6 a.m. Today, he is still working. Not because he loves his job, but because he has to. To understand how Daniel ended up here, we have to go back to the mid-1980s. Daniel was in his late 20s. The American economy was booming. This was the era when 401k retirement accounts were becoming standard in the workplace, replacing traditional pensions. Mutual funds and index funds were suddenly accessible to the average worker. Daniel heard his coworkers in the break room talking about the stock market. He read articles about compounding returns. The logic made sense to him, but a deeper psychological barrier held him back: the fear of bad timing. "I'll start next year," he told himself in 1987, just before Black Monday wiped 22% off the Dow Jones in a single day. When the crash happened, Daniel felt vindicated. "See, it's a rigged game," he thought. He felt smart for staying in cash. Throughout the 1990s bull market, as the S&P 500 marched upward, Daniel watched from the sidelines. "The market is too high right now," he rationalized. "I'll wait for a pullback. I need more savings first before I risk it." Then came the dot-com crash in 2000. Once again, Daniel felt like a genius for doing nothing. This is a psychological phenomenon called analysis paralysis, mixed with loss aversion. Studies show that the pain of losing $100 is psychologically twice as powerful as the joy of gaining $100. Daniel was so terrified of seeing his portfolio drop temporarily that he ignored the silent, invisible thief stealing from him every single day: inflation. Year after year, Daniel postponed what he logically knew was a smart decision. He confused inaction with safety. But in the financial world, safety is an illusion if your money isn't growing. By waiting for the perfect moment, Daniel was letting the most valuable asset in investing slip through his fingers. He wasn't just losing potential money, he was losing time. To truly grasp the magnitude of Daniel's mistake, we need to introduce someone else. Daniel had a colleague in the IT department. Let's call him Kevin. Kevin and Daniel were the same age, made the exact same salary, and lived in similar neighborhoods. But Kevin had a different mindset. In 1985, at the age of 26, Kevin set up an automatic transfer. Every month, without fail, $200 was deducted from his paycheck and put into a broad S&P 500 index fund. That's roughly $50 a week. The cost of a few pizzas and beers. Kevin wasn't a stock-picking genius. He was completely passive. When the market crashed in 1987, Kevin didn't panic and sell. His $200 simply bought more shares at a discount. Through the Gulf War, the dot-com bubble, and the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, Kevin never stopped that automatic $200 contribution. Nothing aggressive, nothing risky, just relentless consistency. Let's look at the hard mathematical facts. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned an average of about 10% annually before inflation. By the time Kevin turned 60, he had contributed out of his own pocket a total of $81,600 over 34 years. But because of the mathematical miracle of compound interest, where your interest earns interest, and then that interest earns even more interest, his portfolio had exploded. By age 60, Kevin's investment portfolio reached nearly $1.1 million. And Daniel, who saved his money diligently in a bank account earning 1% or 2% a year, heavily taxed by inflation. Daniel had less than $90,000 in total savings. The difference between the two men wasn't intelligence, luck, or income. The difference was exactly $1 million, bought and paid for by time. Daniel finally woke up to reality. At age 47, during a routine meeting with a human resources representative about his retirement benefits, the math was laid out in front of him. He looked at his modest savings account. Then, he looked at the projected cost of living for a retiree in the 2020s, factoring in healthcare, property taxes, and inflation. Panic set in. For the first time in his life, Daniel opened a brokerage account. He started aggressively funneling $600 a month into the market. He was finally doing it. He was investing. But there was a brutal mathematical truth he couldn't escape. He had already lost the most critical ingredient in wealth building. He had lost over 20 years of compound interest. This is where the math gets terrifying. To catch up to Kevin's $1.1 million, Daniel couldn't just invest $200 a month. Starting at 47 to reach $1 million by age 65, Daniel would have had to invest nearly $2,500 every single month. On an IT technician's salary, while paying a mortgage and daily living expenses, that was mathematically impossible. He was trapped. This brings us to the psychological concept of the sunk cost fallacy, but in reverse. Daniel spent decades justifying his inaction, convincing himself that waiting was the smart play. When he finally realized he was wrong, the mountain was too high to climb. Today, Kevin is fully retired. He spends his winters in Florida, pays for his grandchildren's college funds, and never worries about the price of groceries. Daniel is 67. His back hurts, and his eyesight is fading from decades of staring at computer screens. He works 25 hours a week at a local hardware store. He doesn't do it to stay busy or to socialize. He stands on his feet for 5 hours a day solely to cover the rising premiums of his health insurance because his minimal savings aren't enough to survive on. In the final paragraph of his email to me, Daniel wrote a sentence that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He wrote, "I didn't lose money in the market. I lost money because I never gave it time to grow." This is the ultimate tragedy of Daniel's story. Financial ruin usually has a villain, a scammer who took your money, a boss who fired you, a bank that foreclosed on your home. But Daniel has no one to blame but his own fear. We often think of investing as a tool for greed, a way to buy sports cars and mansions. But that's a toxic misconception. For the average American, investing isn't about getting rich quick. It's about buying your future freedom. It's about purchasing the right to wake up at 60 years old and decide what you want to do with your day, rather than having a manager dictate your schedule. Daniel's mistake wasn't just financial, it was existential. By hoarding his cash to avoid market volatility, he inadvertently traded away the last healthy decades of his life. He protected his dollars from the stock market, but he failed to protect his time from the crushing reality of inflation and age. Most financial collapses don't come from one massive, catastrophic mistake. Hollywood loves to show the dramatic crash, the sudden bankruptcy. But in the real world, ruin is usually quiet. It comes from small, passive decisions repeated over decades. If you are watching this right now and waiting for the perfect time to get your finances in order, whether that means opening an IRA, buying physical assets, or finally setting up an automatic investment plan, let Daniel's story be your warning. There is no perfect time. The market will always have reasons to scare you. There will always be an economic crisis on the horizon, an election to worry about, or a reason to delay. But the cost of waiting is always higher than the cost of temporary volatility. Because in the game of wealth, doing absolutely nothing is, ironically, the most expensive and dangerous decision of all. Thank you for watching. If this story changed how you think about your money, hit that subscribe button. And remember, your future self is relying on the decisions you make today. See you in the next video.